Steve August Fáilte Arash to the Crazy House Prices podcast, the podcast where I help you buy your own home, understand the madness of the Irish housing market, and generally just adult a bit better. I'm your host, Ciarán Mulqueen. Today in episode 46, I'm joined by Chris Kent, who is one of my favourite Irish comedians at the moment and someone who knows the Irish housing market pain firsthand. I find Chris's stuff really relatable, really funny, and I've been tagged hundreds of times in his videos about his search for a house. So today, Chris talks openly about nearly 3 years of house hunting, brutal viewings, estate agents being unprofessional, shocker, bidding wars that made no sense, and how he went from being an electrician back to full-time comedy while trying to get mortgage approval. There are some really funny stories in this, with everything from fights with bouncy castle men to an estate agent saying that Chris had culty features, but also loads that will sound really painfully familiar if you're trying to buy a house right now. So if you're in the middle of viewings, bidding, or losing the head altogether with the whole mess of everything, I think this episode will help with some humour and let you know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So let's get into it. Okay, today on the podcast, I have Chris Kent, comedian, who is, well, should I say comedian Chris Kent or Chris Kent, comedian, who is on to chat to us about how him and his wife and the kids managed to get their own home. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Chris.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ciarán. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sure you're only delighted to be talking about housing.
Absolutely.
I find it's a weird Instagram to have because people are very much, before they buy their house, they're all in because you need every bit of help you can get. And then when they get through the trauma of it, they're like, Jesus, I can't listen to this fella anymore. So I don't know how, like, my followers are going up, but I don't know how, because maybe it's just more people trying to buy. But I know it's traumatic to go back to a very difficult part of your life. But yeah, so I just thought we'd have a little chat through. Like, so were you guys kind of renting before you bought, or what was your story?
Yeah, so we were renting. So we lived in the UK for about 6 years, and we just moved back after COVID, basically, or during COVID, like the second lockdown. We moved back to Ireland. There was no more gigs were gone, so it was kind of living in my parents' house in my childhood bedroom with my wife and kids for a while, because there was no gigs and there was no sign of gigs coming back. So basically I went back to work then as an electrician. Luckily, very luckily, I had that to fall back on, and very luckily I managed to get a job, because I was 10 years out of that, you know what I mean? So it was a long time to be away from the trade, and what was a nerve-wracking couple of weeks initially turned into be something that I absolutely loved to go back. It was brilliant to go back to a job. So I got out of the childhood bedroom, I suppose, which I didn't think we were even going to get out of for a while, so let alone buy a house. It was just looking grim. Even just looking for rental properties in Cork that time was hard, just dealing with estate agents and me not having proper work at that time. But eventually I got the job. We moved into a house and we were renting here then. And I suppose a year into me being an electrician, I said, I can get a mortgage now. This is great, because I hadn't had that option for a long time. So we got a mortgage through a broker, myself and my wife. So she's a teacher, I was an electrician, 2 decent jobs really. And then the gigs came back actually after a while. So I essentially had 2 jobs when we were looking, and I wasn't used to being on decent money. Being a qualified electrician is decent money, so we were saving a lot even though we were renting, and the gigs came back, so I was able to save even more. So yeah, then we got the mortgage, which I thought would be the stressful part, getting the mortgage. Little did I know that was the very start of what was a very stressful, I suppose, nearly 3 years or so,
Yeah, very often it's getting the mortgage is the easy part now, especially if one of you are a teacher. I'm a teacher as well, so if one's a teacher, we're like the golden child for mortgages, and they love us, but we just don't earn enough to give us a big enough mortgage. But
I know
a very handy trade to fall back on. So
great.
I know you did a great skit on, you've done a few bits on housing on your Instagram, and I always get tagged to like 100 tags.
Loads of people tag you all the time.
Yeah. They get sent to me in my DMs, and I was like, I've seen it. He's a good man. But there was a funny one about like the hole in the floor with the estate agent and all of that. Was that true? Did it actually happen? Did you go to?
Yeah, it did happen. Yeah. So I actually have a video. I found a video of that house recently. It was about 5 years ago now, probably maybe 4 years ago. I took a video of that house, and including the big massive hole that I talked about, and just the kind of nonchalant attitude of, oh, be careful, your kids are going to fall down the hole, and the power that the estate agents have. And it was all I could do in that situation situation was to, at the time, it wasn't funny to me. But after a while, I started to think, oh, we have to laugh at this somehow,
Yeah.
have to get something out of it. And surely people can relate. I'm not the only one in this position. Because also, that was one of the ones we turned up to, and the house was in tatters. It was falling down, and our mortgage wasn't going to cover it. And I was like, where do we go from here? Do you know what I mean? Even if we could afford it, we can't do anything to it now, and we can't live in it. We can't live in this house. So it was just absolutely insane, really. So at that time, I just started, I think I was mentally kind of storing all of this stuff. And then I started to write about it and thinking, oh, people can relate to this, I'd say. Because obviously we were the only two that turned up to that house. There's another two people waiting to come in. I went to different viewings as well, which was like tons of people looking at the same time, which is even more off-putting. You know what I mean?
I saw a very funny clip of an estate agent. I'm sure you've seen an estate agent showing someone a house and they fall down the stairs. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't.
It's very funny.
No.
They just kind of slip, they fall on their arse, so it's not a bad fall, but it's very funny.
Yeah.
I remember when we were doing our viewings, there was a few dodgy ones we went to, but I kind of, I'd done a lot of research, so I knew in advance, how much these things were going to cost and all that. I remember going to one, went to look at a really nice house. Well, it wasn't nice, it was in bits, but it was a nice location in Rathgar. And I was kind of going through the presses and I opened up the press and there was like just a big strip of coloured condoms in the press.
God.
There wasn't anything else in the kitchen,
Wow.
but they left the condoms. So was there any other kind of mad houses you guys saw when you were looking?
There was loads. There was absolutely loads, and we were looking. And just, I have a long-standing, even before we ever bought, I just have this long-standing relationship with estate agent, because I lived in Dublin as well before I moved to London. I remember living in Dublin, and again, being a comedian at the time, having an estate, I couldn't believe this now. This was an estate agent in Dublin. This was a long time ago. This was probably, we're talking like 2010 maybe. We went to see a house in and by the way, I've never ever missed a month's rent ever, and I've always been able to back that up with bank statement, etc. But back then, you still got the, oh, you're a comedian, is that a real job? Kind, you know what I mean? Do you have any other jobs? And I was like, no, I don't. But I've always, here's all my records from renting in Cork for how many years. We moved to Dublin one time, and we were looking for a place again, and we went into this. There wasn't anything about the apartment that stuck out, but it was the estate agent. So we went into the apartment. People left just before us. We walk in, we're looking around. And this estate agent goes to me, you're not from Dublin, are you? And I was like, no, we're not from Dublin, actually, no. And he said to my wife, you're not from Dublin either? And she was like, no. He's like, I knew that. He goes, you guys have culty features. I was like, excuse me? And he was like, you have culty features. You don't look like you're from Dublin. And I was like, what is going on here? I just couldn't believe it. Like, I was like, what?
And you're from the city anyway, aren't you?
I'm from the city anyway. And like, he was like, you got culty features though. I could tell you were both culty. And I was
Did he elaborate?
No, he didn't. No, he just said, oh, no, he said the dark hair and you don't get, and I'm like, what? I just couldn't get my head around it. But here's the kicker. He was from Roscommon, and he said that. I'm from Roscommon myself. But
I can spot you.
Yeah, and I know a Roscommon person walking down the street. My God, so crazy to me.
Just very bad social skills. Yeah,
so bad. Just like, what are you doing? The same in England, there were no real diff. I remember renting over there, and we rented a brand new apartment when we moved there. So it was like, oh, this is brand new. So it was lovely, and I was there when we were moving out of that place. Maybe 2 years later, we had a kid, and we moved to a bigger place further out. And I saw estate agents come in showing people the place, and you just see. I don't like to bash them because I know they're not all bad, but I'm just giving my bad experiences with estate agents, really. And an estate agent went into the kitchen one time, and he was showing a guy while I was at home working, this place, blah blah blah. And the guy was like, "Is there a dishwasher?" And the estate agent was like, "I don't know. I'm really sorry, I don't know." And I'm like, "I know it's integrated and it looks like it's all one, but you can find, like, it's easy. Gravitate towards the sink and find out, like, or ask me. I'm there."
I'm there, yeah.
And when we were moving out of there, I've never experienced anything like this. We moved out of a brand new apartment, and a guy came to do the checkout, it was called, and he had a DVD with him. And he goes, "You got a DVD when you moved in? This is my copy." And I was like, "Okay." He goes, "Did you watch this?" And I said, "No, we didn't watch it." He showed me the DVD, and he was like, "This is the DVD." And he had made basically a video before we moved in, so everything was in the exact same place, right? So he was like, "No, I'm going to make another one, And before I do it though, I'm going to go around, do a snag list and tell you what's different from the first DVD. First of all, I was apologetic that I didn't watch this guy of my empty apartment. And when I say he went through it with a fine tooth comb, it was absolutely insane. My wife was heavily pregnant at the time. We had cleaned it, like we had left it so nice, but he went around and was like, no, this is not good enough. That's not good enough. He took me over to the washing machine and opened it up, and there was a little bit of residue of washing powder. And he said, this is not, like, you may lose a bit of your deposit for this. Oh my God. So I spent another 2 hours there with him cleaning again, so I wouldn't lose any of my deposit. But anyway.
The notions.
Yeah.
Like, that's bad. That's really bad. And the irony of an estate agent kind of talking down to you as if being a comedian isn't a proper job, with the rich history of very, very famous and successful Irish comedians we have. And then also considering, like, as you said, they're not all bad, but really their job is post a few photos that someone else took, someone else takes the photos. They don't take the photos, someone else takes them. Someone else, the AI does all the measurements and all that. Yeah. And AI does the ad description. They literally just press post on an ad, turn a key in the door and forward emails. So, I mean, who's not really doing the job here?
Exactly. And I sort of like forced into, not forced, but I mean, I didn't, there was a crash in '09 and I didn't work as an electrician mainly for that reason, but so it was really frustrating. So I've had years and years of sort of not good experiences. I had one really good landlord in Dublin, actually, one good guy there, but and the landlord, we ended up renting in Cork. But as far as estate agents go, I've just never had great luck with them, and maybe I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder with them. So that was kind of it was an uphill battle before I ever started to look for houses in the first place anyway. And then of course it was just the wrong time. It was such bad timing when we came back just after COVID to start looking. It was just so frustrating. Every night we were going to look at places. We got into a couple of bidding wars, which are just crazy because you don't even really know if you have the money. You're like, our mortgage is this, we have this savings, I think we that. Yeah. You don't even know what you need to end up, you start going, oh yeah, we might need other fees as well for solicitors, etc. Yeah. You're just blindly bidding on this place. And obviously they're all driving against each other. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just making the problem even worse. So,
and it was tricky then because of viewings and stuff. You weren't able to, like, I was getting stories. COVID was a mad time for many reasons, but I was getting stories from people saying that there was the viewings were so strict that you had to send 20 grand deposit to do the viewing.
Wow.
Now this is against, like, there's all sorts of issues with this in terms of, like, the money resting in their account, or there's all these money laundering things that they do need to hit when there's over a certain amount of money. There's like, well, how long are you going to keep that? How do I guarantee you're going to get it back? But it was basically just their way of being like, we don't want anyone wasting our time. We could go and die doing this viewing if someone coughs on us. It was a mad old time, but thankfully we're through that now. But I think some of them were adapting pretty quickly with video viewings and all that. But
ours probably, by the time we got back and lived with my mum for a bit and rented, it was okay. I think it had calmed down COVID wise. But I do remember when people were coming to see our place before we left the UK, just outside London in St Albans, we had to leave our apartment before anybody came. Like, I think it was something silly like 60 minutes beforehand, and if you wouldn't mind just spraying everything, it was just crazy. Spray all the handles and stuff. I remember that. It was just crazy. We were walking out. I was walking out and, like, with two small kids, going out regardless, rain, hail or shine, like leaving our apartment, and you couldn't even go anywhere because nowhere was open during COVID. So just spraying everything so somebody could come in and look at our house. But luckily the whole COVID thing was starting to calm down viewings wise. But unfortunately, it seemed to be getting worse and worse and worse. And that first period when we were looking, when I was working as an electrician, we probably looked for about a year and a half, maybe 18 months. And it was really starting to stress us out because I was coming in from work, yourself, you're just going back out to another viewing, you're dragging the kids with you. And it just felt like it was just repeating itself. And then the gigs were coming back slowly but surely. And I started to talk about this sort of further down the line. And it's actually my wife in the end that said it to me. I think you could probably just, give up up your job as an electrician. And that was
Yeah.
another sort of hurdle, because I also gave up the mortgage,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to give up my job at all, but we just felt like I had two jobs, she had a job. We had decent savings at that time. And I was like, what? This is never going to work out. It just
And
but that's, sorry.
how old are your kids? You have two kids, don't you?
Yeah, my kids are 9 and 6 now. So
9 and 6. So they were very young at
they
the
were very
time.
young. Yeah, they
So
were very young.
talk to me a bit about getting your, so when you managed to get your mortgage, because I know, as I come from a family of kind of self-employed entrepreneurs, and
Yeah.
and it's why I'm a teacher, because I know how tough it is. But how did you find that then, in terms, because you were self-employed then, going for the mortgage, and obviously your wife's a teacher, and then with the kids as well, there's that impacts how much of a mortgage you can get because you have childcare fees and all that. But yours were yours in creche or anything at the time, or what was that?
No, mine. Luckily, no, mine were in school, and you get a certain amount of hours here a week in a creche, and one of them was in a creche, and one of them was in a school.
All right,
Or
so you weren't too bad.
Montessori, sorry. But basically, and we had my mum helping as well, so that was kind of helping with childcare. Kind of one of the reasons we were moving back anyway. So the initial mortgage was actually, I got it off being an electrician, so that was fine. That was like no problem. But even when we were kind of looking for a bit more, I said, I'm actually making this off comedy as well, and here's my accountant's letters and all that. They weren't really taking it into account, They were like, yeah, maybe. So it was a big risk giving up the job, and then going, right, I may never get a mortgage again. That's a risk that I was kind of just going. But we also didn't think we were going to get a house. We were like, we got 2 jobs now, 3 jobs between us. So basically, we said we'd give it a good, I think I had a year of decent gigs behind me, but I had to almost start here again, because everything in the UK was just, it doesn't matter. You were doing comedy over there, it doesn't matter. You weren't, you were paying your tax over there. We're not taking any of that into account. So it was all very stressful. But after, we had a really good broker actually, because the banks, we went direct to a couple of banks, and we found it just really stressful and overwhelming. And they more so were going, questioning my job as a comedian or self-employed, and they were like, oh no, that's not great. But the broker I found that we had was really good, and he just said, no, just put me in touch with your accountant, put me in touch with your agent, put me in touch with this person, tell me whatever gigs you get yourself, blah blah blah. And it was just, I felt like, oh, I have a normal job, because eventually I was making more off than I was even making off being an electrician.
Definitely.
So,
it's going to a broker, especially when someone's self-employed. Like, I'm a big advocate for using a broker. I have like a partnership with a broker that I send people to, because they're really good. And I just get it, because I also am self-employed as well as being a teacher. As I said, I come from a family of them, and like it always wound me up to no end when you see these AIB ads, and they're like, we're back and brave, and it's like, they'll only give you a mortgage, especially during the recession, if you're a teacher, a guard, or whatever. Like, they're not back and brave. They make it so difficult for self-employed people. So that's where the benefit of a broker comes in, where I always say they're kind of like, it's kind of like Tinder for getting a mortgage. They know which lender is going to suit you best. And you're not wasting time with ones that aren't going to, and there's new lenders in the market now that are more modern and less rigid and less strict and less archaic as the pillar banks and Bank of Ireland, AIB, PTSB. There's newer lenders now that are more modern, I guess, and understand that, people, it's good if people want to pursue their passion as their career. We should be encouraging this, not saying, no, you have to get the old 40 hours a week doing whatever. It's really, really tricky so it's way more difficult than it should be. But again, brokers will, I think some people can either not really understand that, or some people think, sure, I'll be grand. But you really do need to get proper advice on it. So I'm glad it worked out for you.
It was so worth it. And our goalposts changed so much, because I went in being an electrician, and we stuck with the same broker, and he got us the first mortgage, and then we stopped. And then, we explained to him, Chris is quitting his job now. So I think at the time we may have had a couple of months left on whatever mortgage we had anyway. But he said, yeah, well, look, just come back to me when you have however many books for your comedy, and put me in touch with this person. And then he got us another mortgage essentially. And we had that for another year or so or whatever. And then it came even changed again for me. Maybe a year and a half later, I sort of switched to a company and then was back being sort of paying myself out of the company. But he was just really great at just anything you went to him. He was just, okay, that's fine. We'll readjust and send me this or send me that. And, you know, it all worked out in the end.
Yeah. Not seeing problems,
Yeah.
not seeing problems, just seeing solutions. See, that's the benefit of it. Yeah. Rather than to
100%.
feeling like you're being scolded.
Because I was sitting in banks and you're like, oh, even in a bank that it's really frustrating when you're in a bank and you're like, you can see all of my money coming in. I've been with you, I won't name the banks, but I've been with you for how many years now?
Since I'm a student, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how many years have you seen me pay my rent every single week? My mortgage is calculating as slightly less than this. Do you know what I mean? And I now have savings, but you still don't trust me to pay a mortgage. This is just insane. Like, you have all of the data you need there. You have, like, you know, you can just go back there and you can see every single month for however many years I have paid above and beyond what a mortgage is going to cost me now. But you're still asking me questions. It's just kind of, you feel like banging your head against the wall. You know, and it shouldn't be that difficult. It really shouldn't.
No, that's like my tagline. I feel like it shouldn't be this difficult. Like, because I get all these good news stories in, and people are saying, you know, they're delighted because after 2 years of just pure hell, they managed to get their keys, and I'm like, it really doesn't need to be this difficult.
No. And it's like, I'm definitely glad I went down the broker route. It was a game changer for us. But and we ended up moving away from the bank that we were with then, which was just, you know, I was like, okay, I'm taking all my money out of here now, and we got a mortgage with someone else and moved everything out. And then they kind of asked, oh, where are you going, or where are you going? And you're like, I don't even want to get into it with them then, because I've spent all my energy on because we had 18 months of looking, gave up our mortgage. I went full time as a comedian, and then eventually got another mortgage and started looking again. And weirdly enough, it somehow felt worse. It was like, oh, we thought it was going to calm down a bit. We thought, maybe it was just COVID, or maybe, you know, but it seemed to be getting worse.
You're probably overpaying for your mortgage protection. Now, I'm not, because I use Beat the Bank and I've been dealing with them for years. They're an Irish company, and in a world where most companies in the home buying process are out for themselves, it's refreshing to have one that genuinely cares about you. As cliche as that sounds, but they really do. So how they work is they check the main insurers, they match the best price, and then they take more off. It's quick, it's online, and they handle all the paperwork. They also do income protection, life insurance, and soon they'll be doing home insurance, car insurance, even pet insurance. So www.beatthebank.ie to get a quote in seconds. And did you buy, like, traditionally on the market, like via an estate agent? Did you buy off market? How did you get there in the end?
We ended up buying off market in the end.
Yeah.
What was happening was we were looking, and initially we were really focused on a certain area because my kids were going to school right in this area, and we're only about a 10-minute drive from this school, maybe 15. But my mum was minding them at the time, and she didn't drive. So we kind of wanted to be near their school. Right. So we were really kind of had the blinkers on with that. So we really focused on one area, and you weren't getting a lot for your money over there. Everybody wants to be there. We were looking at much smaller houses than we were renting in absolute tatters with no garden for crazy money, like $500,000 up, and then some to do it up and get it livable. So eventually, it just, you know, we were getting further and further away and closer to where we are. Basically, that's what was kind of happening. And after maybe a year of looking again, the second time around, and just being like, oh, this is a disaster. We have even more money. We've somehow managed to keep saving. However, we're still being outbid, and, you know, we were turning up to some places, and I made jokes about this as well, but being told you're the first people to see it, and then being also told there's been an offer as soon as you walk in the door. I'm like, how? And it's like, well, you are the first person to see it, but this person hasn't seen it. And I'm like, that wasn't a joke that I made up. I was like, are you serious? No, they haven't seen it, but they've made an offer. And I'm like, what is going on? How do we go? You know what I mean? How do we compete with this? So after a while, our landlord knew that we were looking for a house the second time around. Knew the whole time, and it's really nice, actually, really lovely. And eventually he kind of rang us and said, look, I know you're looking again, and you've been great tenants for me. We've been there like nearly 3 years. And he said, just let me know as soon as you find the place, because I'm not renting again. I want to sell the house. I'm not putting you under any pressure. I know it's hard to find a place, but I'm not renting again. I want to sell it. And then he kind of said, look, unless you wanted to buy it. And then my wife said that to me, and I was like, oh my God, I definitely want it. So basically the house that we've been renting the whole time, which is a much bigger house than we would have been buying 10 minutes away, 15 minutes away.
Yeah.
And it needed a little bit of work, but I've been in it nearly 3 years, and I knew exactly what needed to be done as well. And it's got a nice big garden, and our situation had changed so much because I've gone full-time comedy then as well, and now I'm doing all the school runs anyway, so we don't need to be near the schools. You know what I mean? We had the blinkers on going, we need to be near the schools because my mum doesn't drive, and it's 2 buses this way, and the school times are different. Back then it was like one was in Montessori, then one was starting school, and it was just a disaster. My mother would have been on 2 or 3 buses a day, sort of just getting them over and back from here. But so we kind of jumped at that then, and he got an estate agent just kind of that he knows, and we actually kind of knew as well through my wife's brother, just to kind of mediate the whole thing really. And essentially, we were kind of going, we're not in any more bidding wars. Our mortgage was enough to afford to buy us the house, and relatively stress-free in the end. It was like, it was a meeting with the estate agent, sort of agreeing a price between us, and then it was like back onto the broker then to say we're going to buy our place, etc. And that's basically what happened, and it was a massive relief.
Oh, amazing. Like that feeling it's incredible. Like, and I always say, when people get the keys, the feeling turn the key in the door for the first time, for you it's a bit different because you've been turning the key for 3 years, but now it's you own the door rather than
but it was still a huge for me, because it was even massive. Like our landlord was so nice, honestly. He was great, and Niamh kind of knew him through her brother, so it was kind of lucky anyway, that we ended up even renting here in the first place. It was just he moved to another house, he sort of kept this one he was renting, everything kind of aligned for us to end up renting it, so we were probably meant to be here in the end. But it was just being able to own the place and go, okay, maybe we can paint the walls or whatever, or put our own little stamp on it. And we ended up doing it up a little bit. We did a bit of a retrofit to make it warmer and stuff like that down the line, and we're so happy that it worked out, and we're so happy that we're here now as well in this area. It's lovely and quiet, we love it, but I do feel so bad. I really feel for people going through it, because I think it was like one of the most stressful things I've ever done in my life, just trying to buy it. And I feel so bad, and I feel for people that are turning up to viewings and seeing other people there, and I feel like you're almost being turned against each other as well when you're turning up to another viewing. And I was kind of looking at other people going, well, I made I never did this, but I made jokes about trying to turn other people off properties when I turned up. I went straight after work in my Snickers pants, and I was like pretending I was inspecting the place, going, it's not going to pass, or looking in the fuse board and pretending to talk to someone on the phone. This is a death trap. I'm not testing it. Give it to somebody else. But these are things that were just going through my mind. You're just desperate. You're desperate.
You're looking people up and down, saying you've got culty features.
Culty features, yeah, exactly. And to be fair, I actually I talked a lot about bad estate agents, and there was a few good ones on the way where I think we got into a bidding war at one point. It was like a 3-bedroom semi-detached, and it was going a bit crazy, and genuinely the estate agent rang us and said, the house is not worth this. I'm just telling you now that the house is not worth this. And he knew what our mortgage was. He's like, the people you're bidding against have a massive mortgage, and you're like, it's not worth it. Trust me. So it wasn't. There was a few incidents like that where I thought where the estate agents were being nice, and
And did any of them ever come back to you? So in the cases like that, so what can happen is if the house goes for way more than what it's worth, and people are getting a mortgage for it, maybe people have lost their own themselves on bidding online and whatever, and then they get the valuation comes back and says it's not worth this.
And
the bank can then be like, no, we're not giving you that because it's not worth that. Did any of them ever come back to you and say, on any houses you were outbid on, did any estate agent come back and say, listen, the the person who won that bid actually dropped
Yeah.
out. Have you any interest still?
No, I heard about that happening, but that never happened to us. And we didn't get into too many more bidding wars after that. I think we got into 2 or 3, and there was one that was going particularly kind of. I think there was one where we were the top bidder for like 9 days or something, and we were like, "Oh my God, I think we have it. And I think we'll have to do a lot of work afterwards, but we'll make it work. I'll do a lot of the work and blah blah blah." You're sort of think I'll call in favors. My brother is handy, like etc. etc. And then I remember, I think that one was maybe not quite 9 days, but just over the week anyway. And then they came back to us, and we were in touch the whole time. And you can see the offers on Daft, and they said someone else wants to come look at the house. Somebody that looked at it weeks ago, and then that's the person we ended up getting into a little bit of a bidding war with. But yeah, it's all very disheartening. Nothing like that ever happened. They never came back. I heard about it happening. I heard about people being the second highest bidder, and then the first people not only don't get it from the bank, but just go, "Oh, I don't want it." Maybe they go away and do the maths, or they look at the house one more time and they go, actually, no, we'll buy something else, which is kind of crazy because it's just driving up the price.
Yeah, I know. It's mad. Actually, 2 of the houses we were outbid on, they came back and they were like, "Oh, they dropped out," and I was like, "They didn't exist. There's no way they did," because I knew exactly what it was worth.
100% on my mind, particularly with one place we went to see, and it's one of the ones that I did a bit about. It was a really funny kind of setup as well. It was attached to like a hairdresser's. You don't own the hairdressers, but the hairdresser's kind of attached to your house.
Right.
It was just really odd. And we went to see that one, and the estate agent was like, "You're the first people to see it." And then was that like got the call and said, "I'm sorry, there has been an offer." And it was crazy amount. I can't remember exactly, but it was something over the ask. That was one of the ones where I was a little bit suspicious, going, did you really get that call from this investor or whatever? You know what I mean?
I will say most of the time they are obviously legitimate bids. It's just sometimes it's just the problem is there's no way to know, because there's no kind of central system. There's no actual checks being done on any of this. So but I will say most of the time they are.
Oh, I'd say so. Yeah, I'd say so.
But the stories you're saying there, like being top bidder for a while, then being outbid, going to all these house viewings, bringing the kids along, and just you get your hopes up and all of this. These are the things I'm getting in my DMs like all day, every day for 5-6 years now, and it's so people are listening to this, and I know it's so cliche because I hate using those cliches where it's like it'll all work out in the end, but it most of the time it actually does. It's just it feels like when you're in the throes of it and when you're in the trenches, it feels like it's never going to happen, but it will.
100%. And I'm like I said, we're so happy it worked out this way. And as stressful as it was for those 3 years, looking back at some of the houses we were bidding on, there was 1 or 2 of them now I was like, I'm so glad we didn't buy that now. I'm so glad now that we got outbid or that we didn't buy it, because it was more expensive than this one. It was smaller. Yes, it was closer to school. The gardens were tiny. We'd had to do loads of work. We'd had to move. So in a way, it did really work out for me in the end. But I totally get how in the moment, and we had a really nice landlord that always said, "We're not under any pressure," but it's always in the back of your mind going, "Oh shit, what if?" So I'll never forget that feeling. What if he does want to sell? What are we going to do? How are we going to cope if we have to move out of here now in the midst of looking for a house? So that having that alone hanging over you, not just will we ever get a house, but how long have we got in this rented one? It's horrible. It's a horrible stress hanging over you, and I think it leads to lots of people making crazy decisions, and people are buying things that they don't want. I think they don't even really fully want that house. They're going, okay, this is, I think, out of desperation. I'd say a lot of people are ending up in situations that are like, let's just get it, let's just get in there, let's just do it. And I can only imagine the stress of that,
to get on the ladder. And I have a bit of an issue with that phrase, like get on the ladder, because it then insinuates that you have to keep climbing.
No.
But for people renting, and as you said, you don't know whether you're going to be evicted. You luckily had a nice landlord. A lot of people don't, but I just saw a story today on one of the groups, and it was like their 87-year-old grandmother who's been renting the same house for 50 years is being evicted next week, and she's nowhere to go. And at 87 years of age, like, you shouldn't have to worry about that.
How can you do that to somebody?
It's horrendous.
I don't get that. yeah. And we were very lucky to be in that position. And I
Mm.
have been in positions before with landlords and with people in the UK, renting down through the years, where you're just dealing with them. I've never been evicted or anything like that, but I've always had stress of moving out, trying to get your deposits back.
Do you ever think back and get annoyed at yourself that you could just saved yourself all this hassle had you just spoke to your landlord and said, "Here, do you fancy selling us the house?"
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Because weirdly enough, I would have bought this house first day. I would have loved to have lived here, but I think my wife had set her sights on that area
Yeah,
and
yeah.
romanticized it a tiny bit, probably a certain area near my kid's school, But at the time, like I said, we had the blinkers on. I didn't see stand up coming back. I didn't see it coming back to the level that it did, because it kind of blew up for me afterwards, which
Yeah.
was a lovely little bonus. And ironically enough, it was the end of the tour where I was talking about all this. What I was talking about, the house, all the material you've seen, all the clips that you've been tagged in. I was touring that show. It was a whole show, and that was a significant part of it. But it was right at the end of that tour where this ended up happening with my landlord, and it was just lovely. It was really nice for that to happen. I remember getting a phone call. I had 2 or 3 shows left, and I remember saying it to my support act like 18 months earlier when I was starting this tour and going through the stress of trying to buy a house. I was like, I would love to have a house at the end of this tour, maybe, or if it worked out, because it was an ongoing thing, and it did. And it was surprising that it was the one we were always in. But yeah, at the time we had the blinkers on. Probably could have stepped back as well and said, why don't we try and make it work and buy this house? And maybe, if I did look back, I probably could have saved myself a little bit of hassle. But who knows? Maybe he didn't want to sell back then either.
Yeah, it might have been too quick. Yeah.
Yeah. It might
So
have been too
it's
quick.
I know the housing market will never leave you stuck for
No.
content
Yeah.
or for material for
Yeah.
gigs. I know you do a great one on the bouncy castle, the
Oh,
bouncy
yeah.
castle skit. So was that in the garden?
That was in my house.
the
Yeah,
house
that was
there.
in my house. I nearly fought the bouncy castle man. Yeah.
Has he seen the clip? Do you know?
I won't tell you who it is, but I don't know if he's seen it, but what was really funny was when I first started doing that material, it was a couple of years ago in Edinburgh, and I just mentioned having an argument with a bouncy castle man, and there were some Irish people in the audience, and they were from Cork.
And they're like, I know him.
I don't name him, obviously, but they were like, I think we know who that is. And I was like, okay, what part of Cork is he from? Because I knew, like, is it north, west, east? And they were like, and I was like, I don't want to name him in front of everybody, but
if you know, you know.
They came up to me afterwards and they were like, is it this guy? And I was like, yes, it is. And I was like, how do you know? And they were like, he's had loads of fights with everybody, and he's crazy, and he's and you should read his Google reviews. You'll get even more material. I didn't go down that. I had the bit was like, it was already a 10-minute story. I didn't need anything else to. But yeah, no, it worked out. It worked out in the end. I mean, I dropped my kids to school this morning. It's great. But yeah, I do. Like I said, I just feel for people in that kind of situation, and just hope that people don't make the wrong decision. Like just think it's never going to happen. Don't, unless you're really, really sure about it. Don't settle. I think settling is the main issue now, because you think it's never going to happen. I'm so happy that it didn't work out for us, which is a strange thing to say.
Yeah.
I'm so happy it didn't work out for us with 1 or 2 of them, and I'm like, oh my god, it was really.
That's what I get. That's what I get way more. I get those kind of stories way more often, where people say, we were absolutely devastated to lose out in this house, but the one we got ended up being a lot better. I get way more of them, and I've only ever, I'd say, gotten a handful from people who have regretted, or kind of hasn't worked out, or maybe they bought somewhere and the neighbours were a nightmare or whatever. It's in my experience anyway, from the DMs I get, it's extremely rare, thankfully. So it tends to work out for most people. Yeah. If you could go back now, and if you had any kind of piece of advice for anyone, what would be your main piece of advice? If someone's listening to this, maybe they're in the process, they're in bidding wars at the moment, what would be your advice to them?
My advice would be, like I said, probably just repeating myself, really. Make sure you really want it, and you're not just buying it to get it and to get on the ladder, as you said. You know what I mean? Try not to settle. I know it's a hard thing. I know it's a really hard thing to go, oh, you think it's never going to work out, because I was 100% 100% there, but try not to settle. I think we went through a couple of waves of it, and towards the end, I think we were a little bit defeated almost, but we weren't even. But that's what I will say. We were a little bit defeated towards the end, but we stopped we stopped sort of going, right, do we want it or don't we? This and this is wrong. Okay, then whereas before that we were like, oh, we could make this work and we could make that work. But actually we were committed in the end before my landlord rang and it turned out that we bought the house he rented in. We were committed in the end to just kind of wait it out and keep looking.
Yeah.
And I know not everyone might not have that luxury, but we were committed in the end. And unless the two of us were 100% on it, that's kind of where we ended up at, because there was one or two houses in between where I was like, I think we can make this work, and my wife was like, I'm not sure actually. I don't think we can. It doesn't feel right to me. It's the location or the size of the house or the garden or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we sort of came to that sort of thing between us in the end, where it's the two of us have to kind of be 100% on it.
For sure.
So, yeah.
And as you said, if people are in that scenario, like we were living in my wife's parents' house, so we weren't in a rush either. So we could be a little bit pickier. Whereas if people are, there's an eviction notice or whatever, they're under the cosh then.
Obviously,
anyway,
a bit of a luxury, but I know. Yeah, but it's, if you can implement it at all, don't just buy something for the sake of, oh, I have this now, but it's, I can't afford to do it up, and it's freezing, and I can't live in it, and you know what I mean. It's unsafe or whatever, or it's not the area I want to be in.
The area is so important. Anyway, Chris, I know you've probably a bouncy castle out the back that you have to blow up, and I've kept you long enough. But if people, where can people find you? I know I get tagged in all your stuff anyway, and I watched your specials on YouTube as well, don't you? And so where can people find you? Give them your socials.
Chris Kent Comic on Instagram is probably the most frequently used one, where I upload lots of clips, but I do have loads of full specials online and on YouTube, and all of the stuff about buying the houses in there actually. So yeah, YouTube, Chris Kent Comedy, or Chris Kent Comic for Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. So all the usual social media places. And hopefully, I just finished a tour, again, a different tour. I'll be releasing that now soon, the new show soon. And I'll be starting a new tour towards the end of this year. So I'm just working on that now. So keep an eye out for that as well.
Deadly. I'm a big fan, so I'm looking forward to it. Thanks so much,
Likewise.
Chris. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Cheers, Kieran.
Agus Sinead Lahai on episode 2 of the Crazy House Prices podcast. I said that name really weird there, but anyway, make sure you're subscribed to the Crazy House Prices podcast so you don't miss future episodes. And if you want to hear more from Chris, check him out on Instagram and YouTube, and keep an eye out for his next tour. His YouTube specials are really, really funny, and they're free. They're really good. Go check them out. And if you found this episode useful or enjoyable, share it with someone, subscribe, leave a review, all the usual stuff that podcast people ask you to do. And if you want to support what I do and get access to bonus Q&As, you can join my Patreon for just €3 a month. First week is free, and it helps keep the podcast going and gives you exclusive access to my housing community. Of course, my book, How to Buy a Home in Ireland, you can get that nationwide. I just saw it in Eason's in Dundrum the other day. Or you can borrow it for free at your local library, which is even better. Anyway, thank you for listening. Slán go fóill.